I think the change in the business relationships, that's pretty interesting. I think that's new for a lot of my clients. So now that my clients are generating data and they need data from somebody else, there needs to be a sort of a new arrangement that has to be put in place. Any thoughts there in terms of navigating that transition in a relationship, particularly when it comes to data and analytics?
Yeah, it's so perfect, and it's another passion of mine and why I started the company. If we're talking data and analytics, and if we imagine an end-to-end supply chain, including suppliers and consumers. So, hey, I build a machine today and it goes into a plant tomorrow. The relationship that exists today between suppliers and consumers, between a machine builder and a factory owner operator, there is a value firewall between those two players. There is very little chance that there is the type of relationship today that's going to allow open sharing of data. And the reason is the machine arrives, it has to run to a certain spec. If it doesn't, it's a warranty issue. And it's a contentious relationship from day one, from when you accept the machine into the factory, from when the warranty period ends, from when the service team that are from the original supplier probably finish up and if they move to a third party or local supplier of service. It's an ongoing contentious relationship. And data is some of the ammunition that both sides of that conversation use to procure and then manage that relationship long term. So if we're saying, I want to now share data, I want to be open about data, the relationship that exists today does not allow that sharing of data. And I've seen this time and again. So you've got to get past the people that manage those contracts today. You've got to get to the senior levels. You've got to have the conversation around, here's the core metrics that I actually use to manage how my machine arrives into your factory. And I'm going to improve those metrics in the future. But if we continue to just be contentious around data, it's not going to work. So then you've got to start changing the business model. And that's where, and we could do a whole other live stream on this, that's where performance-based contracts, come in. Because what you're basically going to say is, let's stop being contentious. If you give me the data and let me manage the contract, I'll guarantee a level of performance. And if I miss that, there's a penalty. But if I hit it, there's a reward. And then they're incentivized to share data back to you. And that's where the whole conversation opens up. And you can get to a very, very speedy type of innovation with your end customer.
And when it comes to the supplier versus the buyer, what do you get as a supplier? What do you get as a buyer in that relationship, in that new relationship where you've breached that value wall, which I love that term, the value wall, breach the value wall. In that new arrangement that's performance-based, what does each party get? How do they benefit?
So the first, as a supplier, the first thing you get is you're protecting yourself from the economic level, seismic digital transformation that's happening in the world. And what I mean by that is, if you look at all those platform-based companies, if you look at that as one risk, you look at things like commoditization based on competitors out of regions like China. By having a performance-based contract, what I teach companies is, the reason companies buy from you today is because you design the best, you make the best product, you design the best product, you make the best product, you sell it the best, you service it the best. But the only place where a transaction happens is on that sale, and you get dollars back in return for that equipment. If we can keep the whole pie, the whole value pie of your business together, then it's very hard for people to compete against you, whether they're a AI startup who wants to go after your service business, or they're a competitor out of a lower cost region somewhere in the East, right? If you can keep that value pie together as a supplier, there's huge value to move into performance-based contracts or outcome-based contracts. As the buyer, you can eventually stop buying equipment, right? And one of the examples I'm thinking about that we have a company with, we were in the semiconductor business. I don't know how much, if you know how much a semiconductor plant takes to build.
I've done the fab tour and everything. It is crazy. It's like 2 football fields full of robots, and it's like super expensive capital expenditure. I totally appreciate that.
Right. It's like 10 to 15 billion dollars to build a plant, right? And
Yes.
hopefully you got it, you do a good job and you get it correct and it all works. But in reality, we've all worked in a shop floor environment. The ramp up, and semiconductor companies are measured on their ramp up, how quickly they can actually produce at scale in an economic way the latest technology that they promised to Wall Street. So if you don't no longer have to put the risk into that as a buyer of all the capital expenditure, and you just buy output from the machine, pick a raw material, pick a metric that, say, for vacuum, for argument's sake, you need vacuum conditions for your clean room. I'm just going to buy vacuum. I'm not going to buy all the equipment that supports that. That's hugely valuable to the buyer. And both parties can actually win. Then you've got the supplier who's keeping their whole value pie together, much more entrenched and much more protected from a competitor perspective. And then you've got the buyer who's able to work in much more flexible ways and not put these huge capital bets down on their machinery.
That is an excellent point. Yeah, to the extent that you can minimize your capital spend on these projects, that goes a long way. I know a lot of CFOs really care about that. So I think you nailed it. That's a great selling point.